Hi, welcome to the second edition of the Tom's Barbers podcast. Today we've got Andy Nisevic of 1 Degree Coaching. Let's hit the tapes. Hello, we've got Andy with us today. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure, thanks. So I'm Andy Nisevic. I run two businesses. My main full-time business, 1 Degree, we help leadership teams create really exceptional performance within their businesses whilst reducing things like well-being and mental health problems. My part-time business I set up about 5 months ago because I met loads of entrepreneurs who got the ability to make a real difference and add real value to the world, who just had to close their business. And I thought about the conversations that I have with leaders, so right from CEOs all the way to newly promoted managers. 90% of the conversations were the same. It was about what's going on in their mind that stops them from taking action, and kind of helping them through that so they can become action takers, do the right thing. And for all those people that had to close their businesses down, one of the reasons that businesses fail is lack of action. It's got nothing to do with competence, nothing to do with ability or knowledge or anything like that. It's what's going on up here, the story that people tell themselves, that stops them from taking action. So I developed a process to kind of identify what they're good at, what they need to improve upon, and then a coaching process to kind of reprogram that dialogue so they can become action takers. And I'm loving the results that it's getting for people already.
Brilliant. So haircut wise, what are we doing today?
So standard short back and sides, tidy up on top.
Yeah. So continue what we've been doing.
Yeah.
Perfect. So two businesses, that's always interesting.
Yeah.
Which one's doing better?
So the leadership work, the team dynamics, team performance work is what I'm mainly known for. Obviously, my career in the Air Force, 23 years, and then teaching the leadership courses. That kind of helps position me, and it's what I'm mainly known for. So that's where the vast majority of my revenue comes from. The Saviour business stuff is still fairly new. I'm not known as a business coach, and that took a long time for me to be able to call myself a business coach, because I've never worked in business. I was in the public sector my entire life. But I don't do sales, marketing, that sort of thing. It's more about accountability and success mindset rather than business coaching. So once I managed to resonate that with myself, I gave it a go. But that's still building.
So one thing I did
on your LinkedIn, I'm not the genius person around here. What does DISC
and core strength mean?
Okay, so DISC, it's a personality profile. So it looks at predominantly your communication styles, but also then your surface level motivators. So DISC is a really accessible, really simple personality profile. The genius is its simplicity, because it's so easy to understand. So when you're a manager, you understand what your profile, what your personality dynamics are. So you can then reflect on how you come across as a leader. And understand what it is that your team members need, then you can realise that actually the way that you intend to come across doesn't always mean that your team members are going to interpret you in that same way. So when you can understand other people's communication styles, other people's motivators, you can adapt yourself to them. So that's why DISC is a really, really useful. And like I said, it's quite inaccessible. It's quite a low fee profile. Core strengths is a much deeper personality profile. So it looks at who you are at your core motivators, and has all sorts of different tools within it. So again, it is another personality profile, but it looks at your strength dynamics as well as your motivators. So the way that you like to work, the way that you show up, both at work or at home, but in your life in general. It looks at why, when there's tension within the workplace, but you can never really understand why there's tension, because nobody's done anything bad to each other. You know those people that you just don't vibe with particularly well. Often that's because of the way you like to work versus the way they like to work. So when you can identify that, you can start working out what the tactics needed in order for this workplace to become a thriving workplace.
So I'm being really selfish here.
That's
so I might as well use you for the thing. So obviously I've got a team of 4.
Yeah.
I've got girls will work a different way to the boys as such. Their motivators are very different. So I tend to manage people differently. Does that fit for a good business where, like, obviously there's a big thing about everyone being equal and treated the same?
Yeah.
And to much I try and do that, but everyone's different. Everyone's in a different part of their life. So what might motivate one person has an absolute negative effect on the other. That's
exactly what we need to aim for. So equality of treatment doesn't mean treating people the same. So somebody who's straight out of college, maybe doing a hairdressing apprenticeship with you, that sort of thing, they're not going to have the knowledge, the experience in order to just deal with any client. So they're going to need to be treated very differently to how somebody who's been qualified for 5 years, has been working on their own, they don't need the same level of supervision. So you wouldn't treat them the same. However, equality means that the intent is always the same. If the intent is there for the betterment of the person, for the betterment of the organisation, and you're treating people in the same way at the various stages of their career, then that's fine. But the motivators, again, the way you'd speak to somebody who is all about getting the job done would be very, very different to somebody who's more empathetic and more sensitive, more emotional. The way that they need information framing, the way they need to be spoken to is different. So yeah, adapting to the individual is one of the most important things you can do when you employ people.
So do you find people that you work with worry about that? Because obviously a lot of things I worry about is like that I'm looking like I discriminate to one person to another because I do treat them differently.
Yeah, so I guess it depends what you mean by differently. So is it just the way that you frame things in order to motivate people, or is it that you provide more opportunity to somebody?
So within our structure, everyone has a one-to-one.
Yeah.
In that one-to-one, it's all about them.
Yeah.
So it's not my goals. Like, it's their goals, what they want to achieve.
Yeah.
But like what I found in the past, obviously I've had staff members with children, time off and holidays are more important to them.
Yeah.
Where I've got some staff who very rarely use holiday. So offering them time off is like scoring their own goal. They don't want more time off. They arguably want something totally different. So I have had it in the past where staff have gone, you treat them so much differently to me. But then obviously I've got to, and I think communication is massive, how do I communicate that actually I treat you all the same, but ultimately your wants is different to theirs?
It's a tricky one because confidentiality, you're not holding privileged conversations with people, but there are certain conversations that as an employer you would have with your staff that would have certain sensitivities that you're not going to want to disclose. But at the same time, we kill ourselves with confidentiality, because if somebody's got something going on, which means they need more one-to-one time with you, they might need more flexibility than everybody else, but nobody else knows what's going on, then naturally, as human beings, they're naturally going to question why. Again, it is, but there's no such thing as precedence outside of court of law. So what one person needs is different to what the other person needs. What I encourage is that openness. So if somebody's got a specific need, then talk about it as a team.
Yeah.
Because once people understand, most people are good people. Most people understand that their needs are different to other people's needs. So having that ability as an organisation to kind of share what's going on with people becomes a massive force multiplier, because other people will then be more willing to be flexible to help each other out because they know what's needed.
So would you say a key thing for business then is openness? So not hide things, just being open, clear, transparent.
Yeah.
Than, having, different relationships and keeping it, don't say this, don't say that, but actually have an open relationship. This is what this person is trying to achieve and create. Yeah. And let the whole team enjoy that person's success, maybe.
Absolutely. So you have to be mindful of employment laws, and there are going to be legal requirements that you have to meet. But outside of that, where you're not necessarily breaking the law, you wouldn't necessarily tell everybody's deepest, darkest secrets. But what you can do is you can encourage that. And quite often that starts with going first. So as a human being, you're going to have stuff going on in your life, which means there might be times where you're not on top of like your best self. So just talking about that. So it's okay not to be okay is true, but it's also become a bit of a cliche. So as a business owner, as an employer, if you just say you can come to me with anything, often that just becomes words that people say. Whereas actually, if you go first, if you offer up what's going on with you, then you demonstrate that it's okay not to be okay. And that provides that more ability for other people to be open about what's going on with them. A great example, a personal example, is back in 2018, I was diagnosed with moderate depression and severe anxiety. I had known deep down that it had been going on for well over a decade, but as a typical bloke, I ignored it. I didn't do anything. And then over the years, I became more and more tense, more and more snappy. I actually became what you could define as a toxic leader, not because I wanted to, but just because I didn't have it within me, because I was keeping everything to myself. So that ability to put the mask on and just show up in a certain way was just diminished, and I was just snappy. I was a horrible person towards the end before I got the help. When I told people what was going on with me, people now realised it wasn't about them, it was about what was going on with me. So when I was having a bad day, instead of people just avoiding me, they'd come to my office and say, fancy a brew. And the difference that made was incredible, and now my relationships with my team, with my colleagues, with my peers started to improve. I started to find out what was going on with them. So as their boss, I can now make reasonable adjustments to better help them out. And we went from a well-performing squadron to a massively performing squadron because we understood what each other needed, and it made a massive difference.
So that's obviously really interesting. You said about like showing your vulnerability and how obviously people put in their mind that you're angry with them, where obviously it's just maybe a personal matter or a health issue.
Yeah.
But obviously that leads nicely into the thing, because obviously a lot of the thing you do is about mindset.
Yeah.
So showing vulnerability, obviously you went through a lot. So how did that change your reaction to mindset, and what does mindset do with a business?
So the thing is, back then, I thought terms like mindset was just a load of woo-woo nonsense. I wasn't really aware of what I was doing. So back then, I wouldn't have called it mindset. But obviously nowadays, now that I know more, I know that actually what I was doing within myself, it was I was creating a mindset where actually it's okay to talk about things. It's okay not to be on top of the world all the time, or try not to pretend it was on top. So quite often the word mindset is one of those terms that gets used quite liberally, but ultimately for me, mindset is just about appreciating that the human mind isn't either good or bad. It's everybody has good days, everybody has bad days. If you're mentally ill, that doesn't mean that you're incapable, that just means that you need a bit of support. If you're not mentally ill, that doesn't mean you're not going to have bad days. So within the context of leadership, of understanding yourself, understanding other people, that idea of understanding the mind becomes really, really important, because let's say you've got somebody who's a really, really high performer, and then they start to decline in their performance. When you don't understand what's going on up here, it's very, very easy to either become an enabler, and what I mean by that is like providing far too much for them and not giving them the ability to solve their own problems, or going to blame and say, right, you're not performing, you need to buck your ideas up and that sort of thing. And I've seen both extremes. Whereas actually, as a human being, adult psychology tells us what we need is to be able to have the ability to resolve our own problems. So because when we can solve our own problems, we can take ownership of that success. And we're more likely to follow through, more likely to do the work when it's us that's come up with that idea. So as a leader, it's helping people to understand that, one, the support is there, but it's still up to them to do the work. Like I was a dickhead, no bones about it. I was an absolute dickhead when I was in the worst of it. Now there was a reason for it, but that doesn't mean that I that it was an excuse. That doesn't excuse the behaviour. There were still people that I owe apologies to. And I did. I apologised to most people. There are a few people that I've lost contact with over the years that probably I could do with apologising. So I've tried to track them down, but it's not been easy. But when you're able to support people to be able to resolve their own situations, the success that they get, but also then if you look at it from a purely business performance point of view, actually the loyalty you get from people when you provided the support for them to solve their own problems, it's just astronomical. Because you become a leader, not just a manager or not just a friend. You become somebody that they can rely on, that is able to push them in the right direction. And when they're able to do that, the heights that they can achieve is huge.
So obviously I pick up a lot of things you're saying. So obviously you would use the word leader a lot.
Yeah.
And obviously by the sounds of things, you're coaching the manager into becoming a leader.
Yeah.
And I presume that's like a supply chain down that they can pass that on to their team members.
Yeah.
What would you summarize the difference between a manager and a leader? Do you think all managers can become leaders, or is it, is everyone able to change and translate?
So one of the things that really annoys me is when I go to these big conferences and some motivational speaker on stage is saying, you're all leaders. But then at the same time, there's other people that say that you're not a leader just because of the job title that you have or the job that you do. The two conflict with each other. So there's a lot of belief that just because you hold a position, whether it be management, senior management, executive team, that you're automatically a leader, but that's not true. So anybody is capable of being a leader. It can be a 16-year-old work experience kid all the way up to the CEO and everybody in between. Because if you think about what leadership is, in its kind of most basic form, leadership is there to make people and situations better. That's what leadership is all about. Management is about doing the job. So you can be a really good manager and make sure targets are hit, the jobs are done and things like that. That doesn't mean you're a good leader, because if people are just staying at the same level and not improving, then you're not leading them. But a leader is there to understand what that human being needs in order for them to be able to achieve their potential. And that's the difference. I hear a lot of companies say, yeah, we've had people here for 20 years. We haven't got a problem with churn. Well, if that person that's been there for 20 years is still doing the same job that they were doing when they first joined the company 20 years ago, well, that's a leadership problem, surely.
What kind of companies do you like to work with?
So I prefer working with small, medium-sized companies, because the impact that you can have is company-wide. Obviously, I'm only a one-man band, so I can't work with a huge company and work with every manager there. But when I work with small and medium firms, I can take on far more people within the same business and create that company-wide impact. Most organisations that are attracted to me tend to be like manufacturing, engineering, construction. And I think that's because, being ex-military, I'm quite direct, I'm quite blunt. I don't beat around the bushes and things like that. So I use a similar sort of language set, a similar sort of style that they're used to. But I've worked with finance firms, I've worked with insurance firms, with marketing agencies. I can work with anybody. It's just the people that tend to be attracted to me tend to be, like I say, manufacturing, construction, engineering.
So one thing when I was scouting your LinkedIn and stuff like that, what really stuck out to me was this 90-day program. I'm just intrigued. What does, if you was to come in, what does 90 days later look like?
So obviously it depends who I'm working with. So if I'm working with an MD or a CEO, then the first stage will be a bit of self-reflection, is how they're showing up as a leader. So that will be personality profiling. That will be with themselves, with their team, so they can look at those team dynamics and kind of analyse the relationships they have with each team member, and we can look at why there's some people that they get on brilliantly with and other people why they're not, and develop those tactics. That'll be the first stage. And then the second stage, and then that's that ongoing coaching in order to for them to tell me what it is that's going on that needs improving, and I'm not there to tell people what to do because they're the expert in their industry, in their business. I'm there to help them, support them, quieten down that noise. You know, as a business owner, you've just got so much noise going through your head, so many decisions that need to be made, but often you don't know what the right one is because one decision is going to impact something else. So I coach them through that, help to shut that noise down so that they can become clear on what the right thing is, and then just support them through that. So 90 days later, what they're going to have is a much more streamlined process towards achieving what they want to achieve. If it's a manager, that tends to be more of a mentoring relationship. So particularly a newly promoted manager. Again, we'll do the personality profiling, but it tends to be more advice on how to deal with situations as opposed to coaching a more experienced, more senior person.
So, what have you got an example? What's the biggest business success you've been part of?
So I've been working with one client for about 2.5 years now. Well, pretty much they were my first client when I first started the business. And they've added about £4 million in revenue in that time. So in 2.5 years, I think they've grown by somewhere between 30 and 40% in an industry that typically averages 4% a year. So that is a huge, and that started working with a couple of members of the senior leadership team. Then I took on the whole senior leadership team, and then started working with the management. And I'm now doing in-house training for their supervisors. So as they're ready to step up to management, they've already got the knowledge. But one of the key things that success is by going through the coaching program as senior leaders is they now have an understanding of how to coach their own staff, so how to support them in solving problems. So a great example is one of the people that I worked with there, one of the nicest people you'll meet. He believed that his job as a leader was to always be there for his team, help them solve their problems. But what that manifested was that instead of helping them solve their problems, he solved their problems. And the impact to him meant that his team always came to him to answer questions, to solve problems, that sort of thing. They became very dependent on him, which means that he was getting taken out, distracted from his responsibilities about 10 to 15 times a day, which was putting a huge amount of pressure on him. So what we worked on is straight away how to create an independent team, a team that's able to solve their own problems. And it cost a little bit of time in the early stages because we had to go through a process, identify who are the people that know what to do. They're just using him as a comfort blanket, and then develop within the confidence to just go off and do it. But then who are the people that had knowledge gaps, that had additional training, that needed additional support, identify what support was required, give that, and then support them in becoming independent. But after a couple of months, he was telling me that he was saving about a day a week in time, because his team no longer needed him so much.
Wow, to be fair, that's a big time saving.
Yeah.
As a business, so that is, you can get a lot more done in that time.
Yeah, exactly, and have a nicer life as well. Everybody talks about work-life balance, but work-life balance doesn't mean just starting work at a certain time and finishing work at a certain time, because the more senior you are, the more pressures there are on you, the more urgency there is to get your stuff done. So if you're just finishing work at 5 o'clock, but then spending the rest of the evening worried about the next day, well, that's not work-life balance, because you're not there present enjoying your family time. So if you can identify what's needed in order to be able to make sure you can go home at a reasonable hour, enjoy time with your family, be fully present, and not worry, you're not spend the Sunday evenings worried about Monday morning, then you've achieved great work-life balance.
So just kind of so I can clear up in my mind. So obviously, if there's somebody watching this,
Yeah,
and they feel like they're micromanaging, or they feel like the team doesn't make any decisions without them. Obviously, you've just summarised that's where you can potentially help with a business where they become the bottleneck, or they become the issue.
Yeah. So micromanagement is such an easy trap to fall into. The problem is recognising that you're micromanaging. because very few people actually intend to be micromanagers. So what their intent is to provide support, to provide advice, guidance, that sort of thing. But when it's not kind of agreed up front, then it's the perception of the person that's being managed that starts to think that they're a micromanager. So everybody needs some sort of support, but as we discussed earlier with your team members, somebody who's brand new to the business is going to need far more support than somebody who's been doing the job for a few years. So agreeing up front, like what the support looks like and what's required. So I'll check in with you every day, see how you're getting on, might be a good tactic for somebody who's brand new. Make sure that they're learning the things that they need to learn, they're doing the work that needs to be done. But then as people become more experienced and more competent and maybe proficient in the work that they're doing, you can extend that. And maybe with some people, they only need checking in with once a month because you know that they're on it, they've got it, and you just need less regular. But it's kind of but making that clear and agreeing that up front and making people understand what the check-in rules are, what's required of them if they need to come to you as their manager, but how often you're going to check in with them and the reason for that, then the risk of micromanagement becomes much lower. But again, those check-in intervals will very much depend on the experience, the knowledge, the competence of the person in your team.
That makes so much sense, really, when you say, like, obviously, it's like anything, isn't it? When you first do something new, that time is greater, and then obviously over a period of time things come easy to you, or people understand business structure or what's wanted of them. So what would you say is, arguably, if someone's watching this, what is arguably a quick win for a business from your experience? What could a manager or a leader implement before meeting you that would change their business?
So, I mean, the obvious answer is it depends on the business, on the size of the business. But one thing that kind of works, regardless if you're a one-man band or if you're a multinational corporation, are the values in your business. So the mistake a lot of people make is they'll set a set of values that look great on paper. They put them on their company handbook, on their website, on their marketing paraphernalia, that sort of thing. But it's not the lived experience. And so it then becomes very, very hard to keep people to account of what the expectation of the culture in the business is, because that's what the values are there for. The values drive the culture of the organisation. So as a brand new business or as a one-man band, make sure you've got a set of values that don't just sound good, but actually create an emotional reaction within you. Because when you can look at your own values and think, I have to stick to those because that is who I am, then it becomes a lot easier to hold yourself to account. I mean, you're going to fail in your values every day because we're human beings. We're going to make mistakes, but so long as you can keep yourself accountable, keep driving to do that. But then as you're a larger organisation, you become less the person that's driving those values. You need managers, you need leaders who not only adhere to those values themselves, keep themselves accountable, but are able to then keep other people accountable. And I found that one of the greatest ways of holding somebody to account in a business is not disciplining them, not performance management programs, anything like that. It's asking a simple question: how are you out of alignment with our values? But you can't ask that question if you're not in alignment with them yourselves. But when you are in alignment, you challenge people on values, and they're bought into your company values by them having to reflect on their own behaviour and the fact that they're out of alignment. Hands down, works better than any disciplinary process. So about 90% of the cases, not all, but about 90%.
What I like to do is, like, every 3 months, look at the people who work for me and look at myself and actually measure myself up against them values. And what we tend to do every 6 months in our staff meetings, we tend to have a chat, really, of going, these are our values. Do they align with what we're trying to achieve? And I do hold it to the team as well if they believe that the values are still relevant. Because I do feel like with values, 90% of them are going to remain relevant. But there might be one that changes over time?
Yeah. So again, I mean, I would challenge you. Every 6 months is far too infrequent. I'd be doing it ideally weekly, if not monthly, if that's more appropriate. But rather than change, because if you've done your values properly, then they don't need to change because they're who you are and what you expect as a business owner. You dictate your values. Now, if you had multiple sites, you could have like the higher level organizational values, and then each individual barbershop could have their own, not different values, but differently phrased values, because language is powerful. Language affects different people in different ways, but their own set of values. But then challenging people on how they're out of alignment with the values. So getting them to starting with yourself, like saying, I did this and this is out of alignment with that value, means that actually it's okay to self-reflect, because a lot of people would worry that if I was to say that I don't meet this value, that could impact either my career success or my job ultimately. But as the boss, if you were to say, listen, I did this and this was out of alignment with our values of this, so this is what I'm going to do to make sure that I don't repeat the same mistake. Again, it gives that permission for people to be able to say, well, actually, yeah, I did this and that was out of alignment. So it keeps on really focusing on. But then as the boss saying, amazing, but remember you also did this and that was perfectly in alignment with the values. So then you're getting balance. People coming up with their own internal self-reflection and saying, this is how I was out of alignment with the value. But as the boss, you telling them, yes, but here is an example of where you were in alignment. You're getting that balance. So people are self-reflecting and always striving to achieve, but also getting that positivity, that recognition that it's deserved. So you keep on striving. You find that momentum towards achieving that just is consistent, but it has to be consistent. It has to come regularly.
So I like that. I think that's easy to introduce. We have staff meetings once a week.
Yeah.
But I like the way you put a story behind it, or you put a sentence behind it. I think that's one thing that we don't. Obviously, we have our values, which is, gratitude, obviously. But if I put a story behind that, I can see how that now becomes a lot more valuable.
Yeah.
When did I show gratitude? Why did I show gratitude? Or was there a time potentially with a customer I didn't show gratitude, that person has taken that choice to come and see me and visit me? So I like that, and I think that's definitely one thing that I'll introduce to our staff meetings. So it's gone so quick, Andy. I really enjoyed today. It's been fantastic. How can people find you? How can people reach out to you, and where will they find you?
So LinkedIn is probably the easiest. I mean, my website is onedegree.uk, so ONE degree.uk. So I'm on there, or Andy Nisevic on LinkedIn. Are you going to put my name can be tricky to spell? Are you going to put it in the comments?
It'll be in the comments.
Yeah.
I would say it's tricky. We did have like a 5-minute, how do you pronounce it? How do you say it? So we totally get that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure today to talk to you.
Thank you so much for having me on. The hair looks great. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Wow, that was so interesting with Andy today. Learned so much about the difference between management and leadership. Also, back end of the podcast where we talked about core values and how to implement them to the business. I think he's we could have talked all day long. We had so many questions that we couldn't fit in. It just went so quick. So anyway, if you are interested in Andy, obviously reach out to him. I think he will help many businesses. So anyway, thank you very much for watching. Hope we see you in the next one.